Hello, everyone. Again, sorry for the technology, but it's great when it works and it's difficult when it doesn't. But thank you all for working through this with us. Welcome to our presentation called Presentations Demystified, from Proposal to Presentation to Possibly Beyond. I'm Dr. Tricia Mikolon, and I am employed at the University of the Cumberlands. And I'm going to have Deb and Diedre introduce themselves, and then we'll move right into the presentation.
Hi, I'm Debra. I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of the Cumberlands, and I'm a counselor as well. Been for quite some time, and I work telehealth-wise, even before the pandemic.
Hi, I'm Diedre Wade. I'm also a doctoral candidate at the University of the Cumberlands, and I'm a counselor in Kentucky and Florida, and I am 100% telehealth. So I'm happy to be here and excited to talk about presentations.
So on the next slide, we're going to talk about the course objectives and what we're going to focus on today. And what we're going to do is talk about the skills required to create a proposal for presentations, because in our field, we're expected to do these, but we don't always walk through how to get them done. We're going to develop skills to create a successful presentation, including handouts, presenter information, and the PowerPoint, things that we don't always think of needing for these things, but become very important, and how to create your presentation through utilizing research, as well as possibly moving this into an article. So on the next slide, we're going to see the value of this training. And one of the things that we focus on as counselors, is part of our counselor identity, is involvement in professional organizations. And under that, ACA and KCREP expect counselor educators to work through teaching and through research and conferences. So helping others develop their professional identity, as well as for ourselves to develop that. Now with KCREP, students indicate students actively identify with the counseling profession by participating in professional counseling organizations and seminars and workshops. So this hits that one exactly. So let's talk about the next slide, about how to develop an idea to present. Selecting a topic is a personal idea, and it's something that comes to something that's relevant to the field, something that is current in our environment and how we function and what we're doing. But we also want to find something that you're interested in, because this is going to be research for you. So if it's something that you're interested in, that makes it a lot easier. We want to develop our objectives. What is it that we want our participants to learn? What is it that we want to share with them? And that'll help us structure this. So we really want to ask ourselves a few basic questions. What are the needs in the counseling field? What can we do for this? What would participants or counselors benefit from being in this training? And what would our course objectives be? So what will we learn as a result of attending this presentation? These are the things that help us guide and figure out where we need to go, what we need to research, and how we need to develop that idea further. Then we move into developing an idea to present. What we really want to do is review what the training needs are of the field. It's really easy to go in and talk about some of the things that have been presented on 100 times, the basics and the foundation things. But what's new to the field? What's the needs? Currently with COVID-19, there's a lot of things going on with counselor stress and education. So we can focus on those ideas. Or, like our idea was, teaching people how to get the foundation to do a presentation and what's needed there. We're going to explore the recent trends in the counseling field, or whatever field that an individual might be interested in presenting in. And what are the clients or the counselors facing? So what are the people in that field dealing with? What are the stressors? What are the current trends? What are the current topics or the new ideas that are coming up for individuals? Now, ACA recommends that presenters know the topic and become an expert. So this is where that research comes in. We're going to need to understand what's out there. We're going to need to understand and be able to answer questions for our attendees, but we're also going to be able to share that knowledge in a concise, focused manner. So as we think through our purpose and our goals, this will decide what to include in the presentation or not. Because when we talk about any aspect, if we were going to talk about EMDR or anything, we'd be talking about such a vast field that we want to focus. So in that 50 minutes or in that hour and a half, people are going to walk out with a really great understanding of what we focus on and what we're educating them on, rather than feeling kind of inundated and hit from all directions and just getting a grand overview. So on the next slide, we talk about the proposal. And anyone who's ever had to create a proposal for a project or for a presentation, this helps us to figure out what we're doing. Each proposal is going to be different based on the requirements of the conference, of the convention, of the presenters, of what they're looking for. So it's important to check out the necessary information, if possible, prior to. So we're going to look at that proposal application, see what they're looking for, look at what we can provide, and prepare as much of that as we can prior to starting the proposal. That way it makes it easier to prepare. So on the next slide, we're going to look at some of the basic information that's necessary. They're always going to need the presenter or presenters' names, contact numbers, address, and email. So this is wonderful if it's just you, but if you plan on working with a team, we want to gather this information ahead of time because it slows the process down if we don't have it. A biography, summarizing each presenter's education, their work experience, and any other accomplishments that they may have, if they published articles, if they presented in the field on this topic before. Really kind of just giving the attendees a feel of who these people are and why would I want to attend this session with them. This needs to be concise and can be limited to a certain number of characters or a certain number of words depending on the aspect that they provide. Okay, so each application or each proposal may be different. So having these developed beforehand and being able to go in and modify them and kind of slow them down and work with them, minimize them or expand on them to fit the limits makes it a lot easier than starting from scratch each and every time. On the next slide, other aspects that we're going to talk about are the presentation title. We want this to accurately reflect what you're going to talk about. So a lot of times it helps to develop your objectives first and then develop your title from there. So it's going to summarize those objectives. So someone coming in would say, oh, this is what we're going to talk about. This is what I'm going to learn. Our objectives, what they're going to learn during that training and those checklists of things that we can do, and a summary of the training. Again, this can be limited in character. All of these can. So we want to make sure that we can modify them depending on what the proposal format is and what the expectations of the conference or presentation managers are. Next, we would need references. So these would be for counseling APA reference format that would support our research and support our topic. We would like to provide a summary of these, and I know that we have these sent out, so we have our PowerPoint and our references available so that anyone who wants to look into these references further can have this. So this would probably be minimally our first summary and our first handout that we would prepare. So this provides our initial foundation for our presentation. The other thing we need to consider is our time frame. So how long will this be? These can vary from an hour, which can be, when we say an hour, it could be closer to 45 minutes because we might need to leave time for questions or things like that, up to 3 hours or longer. So we need to consider that time frame, how much information we have, how we're going to fill that, and if it's longer than an hour, how breaks fit into this. Because we don't want to forget that, we don't want people sitting still for 3 hours listening to us talk and talk and talk. They might need a break to kind of stretch and get moving. On the next slide, and we just talk about additional considerations here. So when we're working with others, when we choose to work with others, I've worked with Deb and Diedre before previously. They were my TAs and we've done presentations before, but really understanding the personalities and the backgrounds. So what is each individual's strengths? What areas might they flourish in? what areas might they struggle in, and how as a team can we approach these? What are the presentation styles of each person? These are important to consider because as we develop this presentation, we're going to want to build on those strengths. We also need to consider the working style. So will this mesh? You know, are we going to be able to get everything done in the time frame that we're able to? Are we going to be able to work together as a team, or is there going to be an unequal balance of work or time or effort? So think of these as those group projects that we've all had to do. We want to pick a group that's going to work together well and not be a group that maybe I'm doing all the work or someone else is working more than I am. Final consideration on the next slide is we want to consider time management. So how will you divide up the presentation? Who will present what sections? And you might want to break this up by slides. So I present 3, Deb will present 3, Diedre will present 3, or we may want to do it in sections. What we need to do then is make sure that everybody is managing their time appropriately. And in cases of technological difficulties like today, we may need to condense their time that we originally planned and work on that together as a team. So being prepared for what we need to look at. And finally, on the next slide, I'm just going to summarize these very quickly and pass it to Diedre. We're going to talk about now preparing for the presentation. So in this aspect, and Diedre's going to go into each of these in detail, developing the outline, research that we need to do, the PowerPoint and handouts, and practice and preparation. So we'll move to the next slide, and Diedre, I'll pass to you.
Okay, great. So the first order of business is developing an outline. So you've probably already done that when you've done the proposal, because when you do that proposal, like Dr. Mikolon was saying, they're going to want to know what you're wanting to present. So it is important to create the objectives of the presentation. They should guide the the objectives of the presentation should guide that outline. So anything that doesn't fit within an objective should not fit the presentation. You may want to just table that and think about doing that as a presentation at another time. So for example, if you are doing a presentation on personality disorders, but yet you go on a 30-minute tangent on substance abuse, your attendees might be sitting there questioning, okay, why is this going on? This doesn't fit. So it is important to create the outline as if writing a formal paper. Some people find it helpful to write a paper to be able to just create a presentation from that, which I know Deb is going to be talking a little bit more about that. But make sure that it's logical and it works for you. So when you create your outline, ideally for me, I wouldn't create a conclusion if I have no body of information with the information. So I want to be able to create the meat, so to speak, of the presentation, and then be able to go back and form the introduction and the conclusion. And also think about what would you want to know about the topic. I think we've all gone to trainings, and maybe some trainings have been fantastic and some have been like, you sit there and you think, oh my goodness, I could have just opened up the DSM-5 and figured this out for myself. So you want to be able to develop that outline with some new information and really use that to your advantage as a blueprint of what you're going to create in the presentation. Okay, next slide. So it is important to have research, and this is to kind of go back to that proposal. When you do that, you're going to need to prove that this is evidence-based. This isn't just popular opinion or, hey, I think I want to share my opinion about the subject. You need to show that the research is scientific, it's evidence-based. The primary way to do this is through peer-reviewed journal articles, preferably published within the last 5 years. So I know I always kind of question trainings when I see something, one of their main sources, like a journal article, is from the year 2000. I'm thinking, oh, that seems like a few years ago, but really that was quite a few years ago at this point. So make sure that you're using within the last 5 years. And if you don't have access to like an educational library, you can find a lot of these journal articles online through like university websites. They'll post those as PDFs. It's also important to use seminal works or landmark studies to help support the topic. So for example, if you're creating a presentation on a theory, it would be totally understandable and assumed that you're going to use a seminal work John Bowlby, Freud, something like that to help support the topic of the theory, and then to utilize peer-reviewed journal articles to add to that. So the other main aspect of that, you can use well-known and respected websites like CDC, SAMHSA, APA, ACA, things like that. But I would never want that as the foundation. I really encourage you to look at the peer-reviewed journal articles. And here again, if it's like a theory, you can use the seminal work to really have that as your foundation. It should be assumed that everyone would know, if you've gone a little bit further in school, to don't use Wikipedia or any other general website. But it is important to remember that that's not scientific. A lot of times anybody can add that information to, to online. So, so yeah, use sources as if you were writing a formal paper. If you would not submit this to something like an academic world, I would not utilize that, for your research. Like I said before, some people write a paper and they create a presentation from this. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So the PowerPoint and the handouts, it is important to develop a colorful and interesting PowerPoint. This is where pictures, logos, anything that you can be creative. And again, put yourself in the shoes of the attendees. What would I want to see on a presentation? Do I just want to see a blank board with, so many words and paragraphs and things like that? No, I would not. So watch out for too many words on each slide. Find out what method works best for you. You may create a PowerPoint. And talking about handouts, they're practical tools to gain knowledge. It's not necessary, but if you find that handouts are going to be something that is going to enrich the material that you're trying to convey to the attendees, then by all means create something. Watch out for too many handouts though, because that can be overwhelming. So I recommend just a few that really makes sense to those who attend. Make sure that you allow time to go over these handouts, because here again, you don't want to just say at the end, oh, by the way, here's some handouts. See you, thanks for coming. You want to make sure that you explain them, have time for questions if anyone asks. And I would make sure that maybe someone who doesn't have a good foundation of knowledge of the information, to be able to go back, like a family member or someone, and just show them, hey, does this make sense? I know you don't have to know necessarily everything about the information on there, but just to make sure it has a good order, it flows well, especially if you create it yourself. You want to make sure that it makes sense, even if it totally makes sense to you. Okay. So practice, practice, practice. In the days of technology, now that most of us are too familiar with Zoom, you can use that to your advantage. You can use Zoom to record yourself, just you. You don't need anyone else on there, to practice how you look, how much time you're spending. I've done a lot of maybe not a lot of presentations, but most of my presentations have been in person. So it's important to do a full-length mirror, just to see how you present yourself. I tend to talk with my hands. And if I notice that, maybe people are watching my hands more than my face, I need to really watch my hand placement. So that's where utilizing family members can come into play. Hey, am I acting awkward? Is this distracting? Anything like that. And you can also utilize the room if this is an in-person training. I prefer to walk around the room rather than just stand behind a podium, and reading notes. So make use of your space if you can. And again, the Zoom recording can be very helpful for how you're presenting online if it is an online presentation. So watch your time to allow for questions. You're going to figure out if questions are going to be asked during the presentation or at the end. And if there is going to be any participation from attendees during your presentation, you always want to make sure that time is allowed, in figuring out your time. Because if you think that, maybe 5 minutes for questions, if people start talking, always assume that there's going to be more questions asked. Okay, so management of your time and co-presenting, make sure you breathe. I have a tendency to talk very fast, so make sure you watch how fast you share information. Or if you drone on, I'm talking very slow, just be mindful of that. be mindful of the clock during your presentation. So you can keep track of each section and how long you want to spend on it. I do suggest using like a stopwatch so that you are familiar with where you're at in each section, how much time you have left. As Dr. Mikolon said, if you're co-presenting, communicate ahead of time how much time you will be spending on each section. So if you have 5 sections, 15 minutes to talk, don't assume, oh, 3 minutes for each one. You may need 7 minutes for one section versus 2 on another. So just be mindful of your time overall. Okay, so again, at the beginning of the presentation, talking about questions, if they're welcome or not, advise your participants if they are welcome to ask questions and share during the presentation or wait until the end. So this is important. If you are encouraging almost like a conversation throughout the presentation, people catch on with that, but you need to let them know, because sometimes the questions are welcome throughout, or you need to wait till the very end. So for online meetings, participants can be muted by the host, and the host can request that the videos are turned off to help avoid distractions. One thing that I didn't mention on here is that for online meetings, the use of the chat room, you need to make sure that you are aware of that. So if it is open to the public, including yourself, you want to make sure maybe if someone can monitor that, like a private chat or something like that, because that can be really distracting if you're in the presentation and see that chat pop up throughout. So yeah, just to make sure that, the other major thing about that, to make sure that if someone kind of carries on with a conversation throughout, asking lots of questions, or goes on with the story, use your clinical skills to be able to kind of shut that off and move on to the next, so other people have time to talk and ask questions. And I'll pass it to Deb.
All right. So we've covered how you take a basic idea, turn it into a proposal, take that proposal, turn it into a presentation. And now we want to talk about what else can you do with that? So I've made this wonderful presentation, I presented at a conference, now what? Well, it actually doesn't have to end there. You can take that presentation and turn it into a potential publication. And so it's a great opportunity to take something you're really interested in and really explore different options that you can do with it. So you already created this wonderful presentation. You've already had PowerPoint. You've already thought through your ideas. That's already now a basic outline for your research paper. So you can take that PowerPoint and you can plop each of your headers, the titles at the top of your PowerPoint, and use them as the heading sections for your paper. And then all you're going to do is you're going to take the research you've already had and gathered for creating the presentation, and you're going to now expand all of that. And instead of it being the words that you were speaking to everyone, now you're going to type out all the things that you said, all the ideas that you pulled together. You're going to summarize all that research. You're going to synthesize those ideas. And so everything that you already shared is what will come together to create this, this paper. And for some people, they need talking notes on a presentation. And so you can actually take those talking notes and incorporate that into your paper as well. And then what you're doing again is you're just expanding all the areas that you would need to fill in for the paper. However, and I'm going to talk about this next, we have to consider what you're going to submit this to. So if I want to turn this into a paper, I have to know if the journals that I'm submitting it to are only going to, accept 1,000 words, or if they're going to accept 15 pages. So that is really going to also dictate what your paper for publication will look like. So along the lines of what Dr. Mikolon had talked about earlier, when you were creating that proposal, you had to have an idea of what the conference was looking for. Well, in order to create a paper for publication, you have to understand what the publication is looking for. So how do you find those journals? Well, you can do a basic search engine, hop on Google. What are topics within counselor education, right? And I can search for that. Now it's going to pop up with journals. That's a place to start. Any educational library, even if you don't have access to the journals, will allow you to look at the titles, like a basic citation and an abstract, which will give you multiple journals that you can look at and consider that you would want to submit to. And then after you've done that, and you've kind of narrowed down or created a list of some of these areas that you're really interested in, these specific journals that you might consider wanting to publish in. The next thing you have to do is go to each one of those websites for each journal, because each journal has its own deadlines. They have their own timelines. They have their own requirements, all these different pieces for what that's going to look like for you creating this article and being able to publish it. So somewhere in there on every single website, every single journal's website, there's a submissions. And so you're going to have to explore that. You know, if I want to submit for the summer, well, I have to make sure it's turned in by the spring. You know, things like that you have to be aware of. You have to understand the timeline for them, because not only, and I'm going to talk about this here in a second, but not only are you creating this research article or this paper to submit to them, but you also are going to have to go through the process of getting it back and making edits and all the changes, and all of that has to be done on a timeline. So just making sure that you are really clear as you're researching these journals, what their timelines are, and again, just their specifics, what's going to be necessary in order for you to submit this. So as we look towards actually submitting, right, we want to make sure that you have the basics. Same thing from the proposal, right? We need information on the author or authors. If you're co-presenting, then you have a co-author. The title, you need a summary or abstract, you need your references. And then, like I already mentioned, you need deadlines. So you're going to look at the website, and you're going to figure out their proposal process, who you submit it to, what information they require, what does that look like for them, how many copies. Sometimes they need multiple copies. It's not as much of an issue now that we do a lot more electronically, but some of them still require paper submissions, and they require them several copies. So just knowing all those pieces. And as you can look, this shows you a little bit of the process that you can go through through peer review. And if you're submitting to journals that have a peer review process, then it takes a little bit longer, because they're going to read your article, and not just an editing team, but several different peers will read it and then provide their feedback as well. And so you can see, like, this is a process. You're going to submit this article based on what they require, and then you're going to give that to the editor. The editor is going to review it. For some instances, the editor will kick it right back to you and give you feedback. You're going to make those changes, submit it again. The editor will then send it to reviewers. The reviewers give you all the feedback, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then they send that all back to you. You make your edits again, submit it again. So as you can see with the arrows in this chart, you're going through several times. You're submitting it back to them several times. So something just to keep in mind, the process isn't as simple as I'm going to write an article and submit it. There are lots of steps that you're going to be revising and revising and revising until it becomes the product that everybody is comfortable with publishing. So peer feedback can be a little difficult, especially if it's something that you have a passion for and you've worked really hard and it's taken up all this time, and you present it and you have all this information and you submit it and you're all excited and you get the feedback and you're like, oh. So it can be really painful. But the really great thing about feedback is that it helps your writing to be better. And as long as you can separate first yourself from the feedback, but also separate out the feedback and really look for what message they're trying to give you and what things you can actually change. So unfortunately, you will get feedback occasionally from somebody who's really unkind in the way that they give feedback. And so you really have to try and separate yourself and sort of weed that out, and then just look for the specific comments that you can change, the things that you can fix, the things that will make your paper better. But the first time you read through that feedback, if it's a more harsh one, it's pretty tough. And you kind of take a little hit to your ego. But as long as you can read through that first time, you know, have some space, go vent with your family or friends, and then come back. When you come back, you can really read through and take each thing in and decide what you're going to do and how you're going to fix it. One of the really important things I said, and it kind of seems silly to say, but take each comment one at a time. When you get back 3 or 4 peer-reviewed feedbacks and you're having to look at all the changes that they're all asking for collectively, that can be a little overwhelming, especially if someone's been kind of harsh with it. So if you take one comment at a time, that allows you to sort of calm your reaction and just look at what is it that this comment is asking for? What is it that I can do? How will this improve my paper? How will this improve what I'm trying to say? And the other thing to consider is that when we're writing, we're very much attached to what we've written, and it makes complete sense to us. When someone else reads it, they have no experience with what you're talking about. Now, they may have experience with the topic, but it's not their paper, so they have no experience with what you've written. And so getting that feedback gives you the opportunity to see if what you meant to say is actually what everybody's understanding. And so as long as you can take it from that perspective, it's really going to give you the space to make your writing significantly better and incorporate feedback so that it's a product that you can really genuinely be even more proud of than you already were before that happened. And then again, I just wanted to mention, just to keep in mind that there are these deadlines that you have got to adhere to. And if you miss a deadline, you're not getting in that whatever publish. You know, if I was publishing in summer and I missed my spring deadline, it's not happening until fall now. So just recognizing that, especially if it's a special topic, because then that might mean it's never published because fall's a different topic and they're not looking at the same thing. So just really being hyper aware of those deadlines. And if your editor says they need it back by this day, you make sure that it's there then or sooner, so that you are staying on top of that and moving through the process. So as you've seen, as we've gone through this, we started with taking that proposal, figuring out what you really love, expanding on it, turning it into, the actual format of the proposal for the presentation you want to create. After that proposal, you're taking that idea and turning it into a presentation, typically on PowerPoint. You're taking your research and you're really expanding out on how you want to talk to people, making sure that the information's on there, like Diedre said, but it's not overwhelming. You have your presentation that you're sharing with people. It's very on topic and focused. And then recognizing that you can take that PowerPoint and turn that into a publication simply by expanding from your PowerPoint originally and breaking out that research and really creating a solid paper based on whatever journal article you would like to submit to. And so that's a little bit about the process. So I think now we are going to, so this is just a review of what I just said and covered. What we're going to do is we're going to open it up for any questions. So if you guys have any questions or anything you want to know, anything we maybe didn't cover.
I have a question about, well, a couple of questions, but my first one is, how do you figure out where to present or to like propose your idea to present in a conference or workplace training or something like that?
Okay, so who's taking this one? I know we're all looking at each other. Who wants to answer?
I can share. Oh, do you want me to? I'll throw my 2 cents in. Okay. So a lot of times, like when you see a conference advertised, they'll say, hey, we're seeking presenters. And so sometimes it's very open, like just a general topic, and then you can do the proposal. This is what I'm interested in presenting. And of course, if they have other people that are presenting that same type of topic, they're not going to want to have 5 different presentations on, a certain thing or whatever. Sometimes, and I've had this, I didn't share it in the presentation, but sometimes people will contact you if they know that you like doing presentations, if they know that you specialize in a certain area. Hey, do you mind coming to our facility, our training, or whatever, and give a talk about, a certain topic. And then sometimes people, so I'm a therapist, but I was contacted by our city's Coalition for the Homeless for some solution focused practice. And so I had to do a lot of research on that because I wasn't in that community as far as working with the homeless population, but they wanted me to talk about solution focused practice. So sometimes you'll actually be contacted by certain people just with the topic, and then you have to do that. Well, if you choose to do that, of course, you don't have to do that. But otherwise, it's pretty open. This is a topic, and if they're interested, they'll go with that. What about you guys? Anything else with that?
I think too, the different professional organizations like ACA or the local, your statewide ones, they may have something very focused. Like where I live, there's a forensic conference that focuses on treatment needs within the jails and within the legal system. So for that, a presentation is going to need to kind of focus there. For an educational, for something run by a university, maybe more educational topics would fit in. But like Diedre said, they may give you very specific focus, or they may say it's open to anything related to the counseling field or related to law enforcement or whichever topic may come up.
And then just to piggyback on both of those, like when you have a local conference, like let's say, you know, the Counseling Association for your state, you typically have the conference the same time every year. So if you, like, let's say, you know, our next conference is in July. Okay, well, they're already looking at presentations and they've already posted that. So I'm going to be hopping on their website and I'm going to be looking at what those requirements are. And so it's going to be a lot of research on your part to look for whatever conferences you might be interested in, and to start sort of marketing yourself in that way. Because on a local level, like, you know, Diedre was saying how people reach out. On a local level, if I have contacted people and offered presentations, like, you know, I can reach out to a local church and say, hey, I'm going to offer this parenting thing. Would you guys be interested? Or you can reach out to, I can't even think of things right now, but like some of the universities you can do it at, you can reach out to different organizations like nonprofits and things like that, and you can offer presentations. And so that kind of gives you a start to your experiences and, you know, reaching out and seeing how you can do that for them. But for conferences specifically, on every single one of their websites, so, you know, 3 to 6 months prior to that, maybe even more on some of the bigger conferences, they're going to post that they're looking for proposals, and they have a whole proposal portal and all the deadlines and things, and that'll always be on their website.
And one other thing to keep in mind is you do presentations in classes. So taking those foundational researches and PowerPoints and handouts that you've created. I know Deb and Diedre have both done that from classes we had, taking those and expanding them, expanding that idea and seeing where they fit in, you know, the field as a whole might be an option too. So we always want to work smarter, not harder, if that makes sense.
I think sometimes the hardest thing for me is I feel as though if I know something about a topic, everybody else does too. So it's not going to be of interest to them. So I think it's more of like work that I have to do for myself too, to recognize that that's not true. That's obviously based on my own experience and work that I've done too. I think that that's the biggest barrier for me.
Yeah, and a lot of times people feel that way. We all feel that way, you know? So it's that idea of, but where did I learn it? And remember, there was a time you didn't know that stuff or you weren't so familiar with it. So there's new people entering the field and up and coming. So it's always great to be able to go out there and reinforce for people who've been in the field for a while some of these skills, but introduce them to someone who might be new.
And Candace, I'm just going to say, when I first started presenting, I was the same way. I'm like, really, what do I have to share with people that have been in the field probably longer than me? Like, what am I going to contribute? And it really kept me from really reaching out and presenting. And really what it took was some of my peers that are like, hey, let's really present together. That's where it kind of got me over that. And so like I've partnered with Dr. Mikolon a few times. I don't know how many presentations and things we've done at this point, but partnering with, people that have been in the field longer that can sort of come alongside you and help mentor you. Also because they know the process, but then they can also help you navigate, sort of that uneasiness that you feel. And after you've done that a couple times, it's like, yeah, I got this. I'm good. I can do presentations on my own. And now I do. So I totally understand where you're coming from. And so utilize peers, reach out to people and be like, hey, you've presented before. I'd love to do a presentation with you. How do we do this?
And if you'd like to contact any of us, we'd be happy to help you on any of them.
Absolutely.
We also have a handout that's a proposal preparation checklist. So that's something that may be able to help you, but we'd be happy to help anybody, kind of even just guide or mentor it or help them present it and be part of it. And that networking is part of something that you learn to do. And it really helps newer people feel more comfortable in this role. And at some point, you're going to be doing the same thing.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right. Well, our contact information is up there. I can actually put it up again if you guys want it, if anybody wants to reach out. And then we're happy to hang out and answer any questions. So if you have any other ones, definitely we're here to answer them. And otherwise, thanks for coming. We appreciate you all being here.
Yes, thank you very much. And we know there's other presentations throughout the day, so if you need to leave, we understand. But if you'd like to contact us, please feel free. And we did send a copy of the PowerPoint and our handouts, so you can access those as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice to meet all of you.